Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining on this Illuminate series. I'm thankful to Rupal and Coursera for actually coming together and sharing their views with respect to what's happening in the online space. Everyone in India is actually interested to know more about what's happening in that side of the world, largely. We have seen post-pandemic, a lot of stuff has moved online and education as well. And Coursera has played a pivotal role in driving this change. So just for the background, before we get into the discussion with Rupal, Coursera was actually started a decade back, in way back in 2012, by two Stanford computer science professors. And their mission was very clear that they wanted to provide a universal access to the world-class learning. And as we talk today, within this decade, it is now one of the largest online learning platform in the world, with more than 124 million registered learners as of March 31st, 2023. Imagine that what kind of change Coursera is trying to build here in the online space. And they also partner with more than 300 leading universities and a lot of industry partnerships to offer a lot of different kind of content across the board for the learners. So that's what a big change Coursera is going to bring and bringing in the education space. I have Rupal Nair with me. She is the head of content and credentials for Coursera for the Asia Pacific region. She leads the online degree for the region and overseas university and industry partnership to develop online certificates and degrees. Rupal has actually spent a lot of time in this sector, largely in education. She has earned her MBA from UC Berkeley at the Haas School of Business, US. She has done a master's in international finance and economics from University of Warwick, which is in UK. And she has done her bachelor in economics from St. Xavier's, our own St. Xavier's in Mumbai. So welcome, Rupal. Thank you so much for joining on this webinar and sharing your thoughts with respect to what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Vikram, for the warm introduction, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. So we'll just straightforward, Rupal, get into the conversation with respect to what Coursera has done so far globally and what you are doing, especially in India and Southeast Asia, so far in the last few years, what all you have built and how you are driving.
Right. Vikram, so I'll kind of reflect on a few things and then let me know, if you want to dive into specific points there. So folks, as you already know, Vikram mentioned, we have about 120 million learners plus around the world. 19 million plus of them are actually from India specifically. We have about 300 plus university and industry partners who are authoring content. We have about 18 plus universities in India. We had about maybe 2 years ago. So we've gone from 2 to 18 plus, and it's been very exciting to be a part of that journey. And now we have about 7, 8 plus industry partners in India who are also authoring content. So think Tally, PwC, Fractal Analytics, and others. And then finally, around the world, we have about 7,000 plus campuses and enterprises who are consuming the content in addition to the learners. The last 2 years, if I was to take a step back and reflect on it, has been a really humbling journey. Of course, the propeller of the movement in online has really been the NEP and all of the thinking that the government has done to think about increasing the gross enrollment ratio to 50%. And that has really called to action all of this work by institutions, university partners, the likes of Coursera, et cetera. And so it's been a really humbling experience to be able to serve what the government's essentially laid out and to be able to work with university partners, industry partners to think about short courses, job relevant courses, as well as degrees that can enable access to millions of learners around the country and the world.
Thank you so much, Rupal. I think it's fascinating for us to learn more about how you have actually built this partnership from two, you said, couple of years back, now to 18 premier institutions. I think most of the IITs and IIMs are working with you now on this journey to offer a degree online. So how you have built this and in the road to building this up, what do you think that what are the challenges which you faced and how did you navigate them?
Right. I think it's a good question. Uh, I'd say that well, with the top institutions in India, we work on two kinds of programs. One is the short courses, you can call them MOOCs or specializations that most people are familiar with. So I'll actually start there. IIM Ahmedabad, for instance, has two courses. One is leadership skills, the other is pre-MBA stats. Both of them have about 2 lakh plus 200,000 plus, 2 lakh plus students enrolled in them. The leadership skills by Professor Vishal Gupta is one of my favorite. If any of you in the audience are excited to learn about leadership with the lens of Mahabharata, I really recommend you go see it. So, for instance, he talks a lot about, um, you know, uh, lessons from Mahabharata and how to leverage things like breaking the cycle of automaticity. So automaticity is the idea of how, as leaders, we get into the cycle of ego, emotions, stress, which impacts the way we meet our goals and the vision and the work that we do. How do we break that cycle and be more mindful? So I think there's one realm of that work, and we saw, for instance, that course being really successful. Why was it successful? Why are there so many learners who want to take it? Because yes, everybody wants to learn leadership, but what better than learning leadership rooted in our own principles, rooted in our own culture, history? And I think it's wonderful, and that's what they bring to the table, right? Which is so unique to what they do. The second is, of course, degrees, as you mentioned, Vikram. So it's it's a really humble position that folks like BITS Pilani or IIT Guwahati, SP Jain, the Indian Statistical Institute have really trusted us with their brand to do degrees like a bachelor's of computer science, bachelor's of data science, etc. The idea there really is, as we all know, it's really hard to get into these institutions, right? You have to write entrance, you have to clear it. With the opportunity that's ahead of us in India, how do we unlock access to students who deserve it, who may not have cleared the JEE, who may not have cleared the CAT, who have a lot of hustle, who may not have the opportunities, are in cities beyond the metros? How do we enable access to them with these institutions? So reflecting back on your question, Vikram, one thing that has been really at the core of the journey is something at Coursera that we call learner first, and really thinking about who are the learners that we want to serve, and how do we continuously think about being learner first in the way we serve it. And I think, in all honesty, the reason we've gotten from 2 universities now up to 18 plus universities is really because we've kept our heads down and really focused on understanding who's the learner, what's their problem, how do we solve that problem. And more than anything else, I was mentioning to you, Coursera is just an enabler, right? We have these courses and the learners come on the platform. We are an enabler, and we're really kind of privileged to be in this position to enable further the brands of our universities. It's a curious question on what are the challenges that we've experienced. And I thought about this a little bit. I don't know if there are challenges, but I think that it made me reflect on what comprises a thoughtful, sustainable, long-term partnership. And I think if I look back on all of these institutions that I talked about, I think some of our most thoughtful long-term partnerships are ones where we acknowledge that online is very new in India, and we have to learn, change, grow together. And we are in this together, and we have to learn, and then we have to change. So for instance, we might learn that master's students want more live time with faculty. So can we do more synchronous live learning? We might learn that a lot of bachelor students are dual enrolled students. They're also doing a on-campus bachelor's while studying at BITS Pilani. That might be hard for them. Can we do something like mentorship for them? So I think, I don't know, I don't think there were challenges, but I think we looked for partnership where both Coursera and the partner could really be willing to learn, change, and grow together, because it's a very new space we're all figuring out together as SRU at Meritto.
Thank you so much, Rupal. I think all kudos to you for creating that kind of access which Coursera is trying to build in the ecosystem, especially for India, a massive country, as we know, so many learners scattered across different parts of India. And if we can provide something which is right for that individual, which will help that individual to grow and learn something in life, to attend whatever they want to attend, I think that's really beneficial for learners. In fact, if you look at it, you said from 2 to 18, clearly there is a movement which is going on, at least with Indian educational institutions, that they are going towards an online mode. And NEP has played a significant role there. Clearly, if you talk about NEP, use of technology in education, which is the premise of NEP, multidisciplinary education, which is again a premise of NEP. And beyond this, the biggest piece is with respect to the GER, which is currently at 26-27%. If we have to take it to 45-50, then you can't replicate the offline institution so easily. You have to go online. And the biggest advantage I feel, aside of India, for institutions like IIT and IIMs, IIT recently opened a campus in Zanzibar, IIT Madras. But aside of that, how do they internationalize their programs? It's very difficult to replicate IIM Ahmedabad in other part of the world. So Coursera is actually providing that kind of a platform, which is helping Indian institutions to actually internationalize as well. So Rupal, what has been your experience while talking to institutions largely in India? That what is their thought process in terms of offering either a MOOC program or a master's certificate or a professional certificate, depending on what they want to offer, or a degree for that matter. What has been in their mind in the last couple of years, how those things have changed?
Right. Vikram, I think that what we're seeing in institutions is that they're really in the driver's seat, wanting to serve the kind of the ambitious goal that the NEP with the gross enrollment ratio has really positioned in front of them. And I think we're seeing a few of the following things. One is we don't just want to reach lakhs of learners in non-metro cities. We want to ensure, and you and I were talking about this earlier, that we're imparting them with high quality education that can make them employable and get them jobs. So there's a lot of thinking going on around how do we ensure that if it's a BITS Pilani Bachelor's of Computer Science, it is, job industry relevant. It is really kind of bridging that gap of quality skills in the market. That's one. Second is, how do you really learn and teach at scale? You talked about the fact that if we have to add about 35 million more students with the gross enrollment ratio, you can't do that in brick and mortar institutions. And we were talking about this earlier. The way you teach on campus is very different from the way you have to teach online. In a Zoom setting like this right now, I see we have about 60 plus people who've dialed in. Imagine if there's 1,000 or more that you want to teach in this way. How do you teach that in a high quality way? How do you teach at scale? You don't just teach, but how you teach quality learning at scale. So there's a lot of thoughtful thinking going around. How do you impart learning at scale, right? Can you do online hands-on learning? Can there be virtual labs, Coursera labs that make it easier for the learner to practice assessments, coding, etc. Online? Third, of course, international is something that has come up. I think this is an opportunity with online for some of our top institutions to be able to really go online. And Vikram, it's interesting. What we've seen is that majority of our online degrees on Coursera have a significant number of international students. Some of them are diaspora, Indian diaspora, who are living outside, who really pay allegiance, right? But on the other hand, you have students from Yemen, from Jordan, from US, from Canada, from the Middle East joining in, because all of a sudden you have high quality education from institutions like BITS, from IIT, etc., available at an affordable price. So you have to think about learners around the world really value job relevant, affordable, job relevant, high quality education at an affordable price. So it's really about, how do you reach access and scale? How do you teach high quality learning? How do you make people employable? And then, of course, internationalization. I will say that, we're in early days, so there's a lot of what we call like nail before you scale. So we don't just want to go out there and, teach thousands of students, but not do it well. We want to do it thoughtfully. We want to do it properly. We want to do it in a way that all learners persist, complete, graduate, get a job, and we don't lose them midway.
So there is, Rupal, a lot of discussion and debate around the online learning, as you know. And if you can share some or throw some light with respect to in what ways does Coursera utilize technology to ensure a smooth onboarding experience for all the new learners, largely. We'll talk about the drop-off and all that subsequent. But first, what kind of technology you guys are using to ensure that the smooth onboarding process for a learner, and how do you ensure that you look at what kind of courses they are selecting, what all enrollments have been done, what kind of assignments they are doing, and at what level can you judge that if there will be a dropout, there will be a dropout?
Right. So the one thing I will clarify is that at Coursera, I can't say it enough, we are an enabler. So we have to really, we are in the privileged position to see how 120 million learners are learning on platform, and how thousands of students are doing degrees on platform, and how do we research their learning science and behavior patterns to build nudges to really help them grow. It's our partners then who do the work of grading at scale, right, of assessing at scale. Before I directly answer your question, Vikram, I think it's important to contextualize who's the learner, right? So I'll share examples of maybe 2 or 3 learners. These are people who I've met in person who inspire me every day. And these are the people because of whom we all show up at Coursera and do the work we do, right? Like one of the individuals is a fresh graduate from 12th standard. She is enrolled in one of the law schools on campus, where she's doing her law bachelor's, but she really wanted to be enrolled in IIT or BITS, etc., and do computer science because she wants to be a fighter pilot. So in parallel to her on-campus law bachelor's, she's enrolled in BITS Pilani computer science. So she's doing 2 degrees and she's very focused. She wants to be a fighter pilot. Imagine that student. Now you have another student who's actually a teacher, who's about 32, 33, 34 years plus. He's married. He's a physics teacher in a college. And he's reflecting back on his life. He actually went to a pretty prestigious institution, but did physics. And he's looking back and he says he wants to shift from physics to computer science. And the only way to do that in his mind is to actually go back and get a bachelor's in computer science. So he's enrolled in BITS's computer science program. Now, third, you have a learner who actually did his bachelor's from IGNOU, and then hustled and worked his way up over 5, 6, 7, 8 years at different tech companies, and is now enrolled in one of the MBA programs on Coursera. So imagine that hustle, starting from a place like IGNOU and then working through your life and coming up and then doing the online MBA at SPGen. What is common amongst all of these learners? They are hustlers. They take full control of their life. They're very aspirational. They might come from cities who don't have access to, a high broadband, and they want flexibility. These are not learners who can be at 2 places at one time. They have a life, they have family, they have kids, they are often enrolled in another college. So the way, Vikram, we have to design the platform now, to answer your question, is to meet the need of these learners. It has to be flexible. That means that if you're on the train, you're in the bus, you're on a cab back from your office or from your other college, you can async learn. You can do exercises, you can download videos. Second, they want stackability. You and I talked about it the other day. All of these learners want their learning to count, right? It's very important. And that's something we believe a lot in Coursera. So if they've taken a short course earlier on in their life, they want it to count in their degree. So BITS has gone ahead and actually launched a MOOC, which is a degree course called Introduction to Programming. And they have said that, hey, if you've gone and completed that course, when you enroll in the degree and we admit you, when you apply and get admitted to the degree, we will make that learning count. You don't have to do that 1 month of learning again. So, and on the platform, it's very easy to do that. You start here. The moment you are accepted into your degree, we can track your progress and it automatically populates. Third is, of course, like I said, we're doing a lot of research and learning science on how learners learn. So we see that if you are persisting from semester 1 to semester 2, term 1 to term 2, that signifies that you are more likely to persist. So we put in a lot of effort, nudges, kind of AI nudges that go to the learner to help the learner drive their journey to ensure we don't lose them from a technology standpoint. And then, of course, there's other things that we think about. Learners want engagement. One of the biggest reasons that they do online degree programs or degree programs in general is they want community. So there's Slack, there's Zoom, there's live faculty sessions, there's industry chats. And we hear that a lot of our learners also start their own WhatsApp groups, which of course we're not on, to be able to engage and learn as well. So how do we build that space to really meet these learners where they are is what's important.
Rupal, it's fascinating actually to hear this perspective with respect to what you guys are building. And as you know, that largely in India and Southeast Asia, these regions have a lot of mobile users largely. So how the technology adaptation as well as the programming or the course which I take as a user, as a learner, adapts to my routine with respect to, as you said, that I'm in bus, I'm in train, I can do my lessons, I can take some videos and all that. From a mobile point of view, do you see a huge use of mobile in terms of learning by learners, or you see same old method of largely the students are coming on their desktops and they are actually learning from there?
Yeah, it's a good question, Vikram. I think that in India, we see a lot of mobile learning. So 60% of our learners in India use mobile for short courses. This is not for degrees, it's for short courses. And this is a number which is a lot higher than the US because like we've talked about, right? Like broadband, etc., people are on the go. And then in degrees, I do think there's a certain extent of learning that people do on mobile, but especially when it comes to computer science, statistics, data science, data analytics, you do need your laptop or your desktop, etc. You have to do your assessments. I think what we see with mobile is, and I can even talk with my experience. I take courses. As you know, I'm like you. I travel a lot. So what happens is essentially when you have your phone and you have the Coursera app, you're able to pretty much just like you manage your calendar, you get kind of nudges to schedule your own learning. You know that this course has to be completed in 6 months. So you get, kind of nudges that, hey, in 1 week, you have to complete X, Y, and Z. In week 2, you have to complete A, B, and C, and so on. And if you're running late, you'll get a nudge, hey, it looks like you're not on track. Do you want to revise your schedule? So that just like your calendar keeps you abreast of what you have to do, you can do that. Second, I think that it's with your mobile phone, it's very easy to kind of download, learn on the go. And then I think third, and this is something recent that I was learning, right? Like folks use mobile for a lot of different reasons. The more that you get into non-metro cities, there are places where learners actually use their mobile hotspot to connect with their desktop and to write assessments and stuff. So we see a lot of that. We see, and we know that, and this is interesting, like if there are campus folks in the room and you're thinking about proctoring, at Coursera, we don't do in-person exams for degrees. It's all online. There's proctoring that happens online. And we're very serious about it. So we actually see like our proctoring tools will detect that there's a phone. And then when the proctor will go in and ask that there's a phone, there shouldn't be a phone in the vicinity when you're writing a test, the learner basically says that I have to use my phone's hotspot. So the proctor will tell them to put the phone away. So I think there's multiple kind of use cases, definitely a lot more in the MOOC world. And mobiles give kind of the flexibility of learning on the go in kind of the degrees world.
Sure. I think there are a lot of MOOCs which have mushroomed in the last few years, as you know, and Coursera being the pioneer in this space. How are you guys differentiating your strategy with the other players in the market?
Yeah, another good question. Frankly, Vikram, I'll say that there's just not in India, around the world, there's so much impact to be had that I don't think, at least I or broadly at Coursera, we think a lot about competition. I think it's the more we think learner first, the better it is. And that's how you and I got connected, because we were thinking at Coursera a lot about, hey, how do we ensure that the learner's enrollment admission journey is seamless and we meet them where they are? And I think, we don't necessarily think a lot about competition. Second, I think in general, Coursera's ethos is very kind of rooted in those pathways. So I think MOOCs for us are not just a product strategy. MOOCs are not a product line. It's essentially pathways. We believe that a learner learns online to meet different needs in their life, and all of that should be connected. If they're studying MOOCs, that should be connected to degrees, their progress should count. So I'll actually give you another example, which is very different. It's not an Indian example, but it's an example from UK. We have a University of London degrees. It's a bachelor's in tech degree. And Google, as an industry partner on Coursera, actually has a Google IT professional certificate. It's an entry-level certificate that says you don't need to know IT. If you enroll in this certificate, we will teach you kind of the entry-level tenets of IT to be, an IT professional. So University of London has gone ahead and said that, hey, if you've completed that Google IT certificate and you apply to University of London's bachelor's program and you get enrolled and accepted, we will count your progress there. So Vikram, I think at Coursera, we think less about, competition. We're more thinking about, it's incredible that we have 120 million plus learners around the world, 19 million plus in India, really leveraging all of this content to learn. If they're choosing to learn courses and degrees, how do we ensure that their learning is counted? And how do we do more and more of that is what's top of mind for us.
So clearly, I think you guys are definitely a big enabler, at least from an education space point of view. You have the academia on one side, you have industry partnership on the other side, and you are at the center helping the learner to achieve what they want to achieve in their life. If let's say, and this is largely for the audience, this question is, we have our B2B community, 50,000 plus users use Meritto in India. We have 1,100 institutions that use our product. So if a university would like to tie up with Coursera, what they need to do to offer any degree or any MOOC program online, what are the steps?
Yeah. Well, you can reach out to me and I will kind of introduce you to the right people, but the steps are the following. We spend a lot of time thinking about, again, I think you all will probably get tired of me talking about learner first, but we spend a lot of time thinking about what do learners want to learn? Where are the jobs existing? Doesn't matter if it's a degree or doesn't matter if it's a short course. We have all of these learners even going online and searching for things, right? Like if a learner goes there and says ChatGPT, we can see the number of learners and the number of times that they're looking for ChatGPT. We can see the number of times folks are looking for full stack development. So we comb all of that data. We have an entire team called Content Strategy. It's an incredible team of data analysts and data scientists who are combing all of that data to really think about what are learners looking for. Then they tie that to job skills. And then we come to what we call like skill first topics on what degrees do we want to build, what are the short courses that we want to build, how short should they be, should be long. And then we think about which institutions are kind of best poised to build those things. So, reach out and then we would work with you to think about what are your strengths as an institution. And then we would do all of this work to understand what do learners want to learn, where are the jobs at, where is the macro environment at, to then come to you with recommendations on what we should build. And that's just the beginning. Like I said, online is very new, especially in India. So then if at all we decide to go forward, the journey really just begins there. Then we have to think about all of the things that take to go online in terms of instructional design, in terms of teaching, in terms of really thinking about the pedagogy of designing each of these courses. So we have teaching and learning teams and program implementation teams, marketing teams, et cetera, that are thinking about all of those things that we begin to work with you on.
Sure. I think we are almost at the time. I'll ask you one more question before we can just get into look at the Q&A. If audience has, I can see there are some 5-6 questions already, so I'll cover some of them. But Rupal, in your experience, at least in India and Southeast Asia largely, what do you see in terms of technology adoption by the institutions? And when I say this, I'm going to divide this in 3 parts. As you know that if you look at educational institution, you can divide them very easily into 3 different segments. One is the input layer where the students are coming in and there is a way to onboard the students. One is the middle layer where the students are studying, and be it in the online class or an offline class, how you are supporting them with respect to their learning outcomes. And the last is the output layer when they become your LM and eventually you want to make a placement and all that. So there is an input layer, there is a middle layer, and there is an output layer. I'm talking about all the 3 layers largely, but specifically from an input layer because Meritto works very closely in the input layer with the educational institution. What has been your experience?
In terms of adoption of technology?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think what we're seeing with institutions is that, and I'll bring it back to where we started, with the advent of COVID and with NEP, there's clear desire and there's clear realization of the fact that in order to teach more in quality, we have to teach online, and in order to teach online, we have to embrace technology. So we see our faculty and institutions really embrace technology. And like I said, I think it's early days. So I think that we actually have a lot of really honest conversations with our institutions on where we are and where we need to be, and to be able to leverage. And you and I were talking about this a little bit, and I'll reference this. Folks, Vikram and I were talking about how in India we actually there's not a lot of LMSs, et cetera, that a majority of our institutions leverage, because so far we've really been kind of on campus. And like I was saying to you, Vikram, like Coursera is not necessarily an LMS first company, but we are seeing institutions really get in there and think about that at scale and think about, hey, what can help them, really teach at scale, which will need technology. And well, I would be remiss if I didn't add that ChatGPT, of course, is going to help completely transform this space in ways that we don't even know. Right now, we have enrollment counselors and others calling people or nudging people. I think Coach and other things, ChatGPT based Coach and other things can really enable technology in ways that we don't yet know at all. And I can see that a lot of institutions are leaning in to be able to leverage that for high quality at scale as well as cost efficiencies.
Rupal, what has been your experience with respect to enrollment in terms of the technology or the platform used by institutions to enroll students? Because that's the first step where you are actually talking to a student or a learner, how they are adopting this and what kind of technology they are using specifically while enrolling students. Because that's the area where we work very closely with institutions.
Yeah. And I see your question. I think that a lot of our institutions today are probably, in all honesty, using some version of Google Forms and other things. And I'd say that a lot of our institutions are actually beginning to think about what does the next version look like. So at Coursera, you and I have talked, we have a certain version that we use. And I think a lot of our institutions are actually pushing us to they are pushing us, since we do a lot of the marketing and recruitment, to understand where is X learner coming from, if they're in the funnel journey and they've started their application. So I'll share an example. A lot of you folks who are doing recruitment or admissions, you'll know that there's certain drops in funnel. So at Coursera, we see that the moment you ask the learner to submit their transcript, there's a little bit of a drop in that funnel, because folks are thinking about, hey, I have to go back to my college, my institution, I have to go get my transcript, and that takes a little bit of time. Maybe that helps the learner procrastinate a little bit. The more disparate questions that you ask, if you ask learners to write like 2 essays instead of 1, learners are going to take a lot more time. We've talked about this earlier, DigiLocker. Students have to go on to DigiLocker to now locate their 12th standard transcripts and put them in so that they're actually legitimate. So we actually get pushed by some of our institutions now. Hey, why are 50% of the people taking so much more longer to move from academic history to submission stage? And I think that that's a lot of improvement. When we ask questions, that means that, we're looking for data, and the only way to get data is when we begin to adopt kind of technology and solutions is what I would say, Vikram. And I think that there's a lot of scope. Like even for Coursera, there's a lot we can all do.
I agree. And we have solved this entire puzzle, as you know, Rupal, with our product, which is inquiry to enrollment. So once a student actually starts searching about any institution or any program and all that, from that stage till the time the students actually gets enrolled into any institution, we have this entire stack covered. So whatever you talked about with respect to documentation or moving from let's say a transcript stage to other stage with respect to updating stuff, we do have a DigiLocker integration as well in place, so students can directly fetch documents at the time of filling up the form by just ensuring that they can call for DigiLocker within the system. So those things we have built to support educational institutions so that they can have a very smooth journey at the time of enrolling students. And I'm very hopeful that this will go a long way for all the educational institutions who are actually looking at going online as well.
Right. And Vikram, having seen your guys' platform, I think kudos to you guys in the way that you've done it. And I think you explained to me in a very thoughtful way the other day I was thinking about it. Just like I've been talking about, like building around the learner with kind of authoring partners and employers and being learner first. And I think in a similar way, you guys have built learner first and thinking about the marketer, the counselor, and the admissions team, which I think is kind of really critical. And bringing those three sides of the triangle is really timely and critical. So kudos on the journey.
Thank you so much, Rupal. I'll just take a couple of more questions. I know we are running short of time, but let me just go and check. So there is a question that what are the drivers of quality in online learning? How does Coursera measure the quality in online learning? That's, I think, a very interesting question.
Right. And after this, maybe, so I don't know who's asked it, but, you've probably read our report because we do a lot of research. So we've actually published a couple of reports on drivers of quality, and we have two kinds of reports. So there's a drivers of quality in online learning in MOOCs, so short courses, and then drivers of quality in online learning for degrees. And so I'm happy to send both of these to you. The way we measure this is that we have a teaching and learning team that also comprises of learning scientists who are constantly thinking about all of these 120 million learners who are enrolled on Coursera and looking at how are they not just enrolling, but also learning. At what point are they dropping off? What do we do? What are the certain nudges that we do that kind of help them come back and persist? So I'd love to share, both of those reports with you. And there's a lot of insights and learnings there that I think folks would appreciate reading.
I think if Rupal, you can share those reports with us, what we'll do is we'll just push that report to all the attendees, because here I can't see who's the person who asked that question. It's anonymous, but it will help anyone to just go through this entire piece with respect to measurable stuff which you do on the quality piece. Ms. Suman has a question with respect to how the gap of devices inequality and access issues, especially online degree, require a lot of regulations from bodies such as UGC. I'm sure you would have come across this. So what has been your take on this?
That's a good question. I think that the regulation by the UGC, etc., are built very thoughtfully, frankly. And if you refer some of the regulations, like I talked about stackability and credit, but there's only a certain amount that you can leverage content that is not yours, so that to ensure that the institution has full academic control. So we actually work with the partner. The regulations also differ by type of institution. The IITs, IIMs, the institutions of eminence have this space to maybe a little bit more, be a little bit more creative, autonomous, etc. But I think all of our institutions follow in principle the regulation, and we work with them around it. And a lot of it is around, proctoring, ensuring that there's very little plagiarism, ensuring that institutions themselves are thoughtfully building content and things like that. So that's definitely top of mind.
Sure. I think it's quite relevant, and I'm sure that the educational institutions with whom you are partnering, largely the UGC laws and all that apply to them with respect to what they have to offer rather than on Coursera. So from that point of view,
right. And learners care about it too. So if you can say that this is an AICTE approved degree, or it was approved at the Senate properly, formally, that matters to learners, because like I said, it's a brand new segment altogether on online degrees. So even parents are thinking about, if I push my learner to enroll, or if my learner wants to, if my kid wants to enroll and I, enable them to enroll, is it credible? And to say it's AICTE approved, or it's to say that, it's formally approved at Senate by the Board of Governors, it's blessed by the UGC, actually gives it the much needed credibility it needs at this early stage.
No doubt about that. Rupal, I'll take a couple of more questions before we just end this conversation. And these are again interesting questions. One question is with respect to how many students are on Coursera from India. I think you answered that, but you can again answer that for audience. But the other part of the question is very interesting for me with respect to what is the focus areas largely which Indian students look at when they come to Coursera. So if you can give us a direction, not only with respect to what kind of courses they look at, but at the same time, if you have a division with respect to what percentage are looking at MOOCs, what percentage are looking at professional certificates, what percentage is actually going in online degree. I'm sure online degree will be very, very minuscule, but still it will be helpful.
Right. So, as you know, that there's about 19 million plus learners from India specifically. Majority of them, of course, as Vikram said in the beginning, Coursera has been around for 10 plus years, and we started with MOOCs, right? So majority of them are enrolled in MOOCs courses. Business, data science, and tech are the top domains. No surprises there. Learners in India tend to be very aspirational, job focused, and the domains that align there are really around business, data, and tech. Interesting question, because one of the things that we're seeing in the last recent years is that there's a lot of leaning towards industry-driven gateway certificates. The Google IT certificate, for example, that I talked about is one such certificate, right? Where industry come out and author entry-level certificates, where they're saying that IBM comes and says that, you don't need to know anything about data science. You don't even need to have a college degree. I am creating a data science gateway certificate. That's an entry-level certificate. You can come from any background or context, and you can take it, and you will be prepared for an entry-level job in data science. We're seeing a increased interest in our short courses world, in our non-degrees world. We're seeing an increased interest in these industry-authored certificates. Because to be able to say, right, it doesn't matter if you're coming from humanities, arts, or if you're even coming from, in India, if you think about it, a lot of people go into physical sciences or electrical engineering, etc., different kinds of engineering and sciences. So it doesn't matter where you're coming from. If you do an this industry authored certificate, you're ready for an entry-level certificate. So we're seeing a lot of interest in that. Of course, degrees is a smaller proportion of that, which is why I had called out earlier that what we want to be able to see over the next years is what are learners learning, and can we draw a intentful bridge between the short courses, these industry authored entry-level certificates, and then to degrees, really, to make the learning count.
Rupal, so my last question is actually related to some couple of points you covered, but it's quite relevant largely from an audience point of view, as well as for B2C as well, for learners as well. That do industry actually recruit students that have done courses online? And I know that there is a lot behind this. You can't answer this question in a very straightforward way. Just to add on here, the question is again recruitment and industry and all that. But India is going to add 100 million actually students or 100 million people in next 10 years in the workforce. And for them, they need clearly some added advantage with respect to what they've learned if they've not done the degree. Because as we know, 26% only go to college in India largely. So that's one. Second is we are also grappling with a risk of automation. Clearly, we see that there are a lot of jobs which are in existence today will not be in a couple of years down the road. And third, and the most important thing I feel from an industry point of view, the skills which are required today to do a certain kind of job versus what are the skills will be required in a couple of years or 3 years or 5 years down the road. So to just add all this, and Rupal, if you can throw some light on how your partnership with industry aside of academia is driving this, both the pieces together.
Right, it's a good question. I'll actually make it very real. So, if I'm sure all of the folks who are attending here hire for different roles, I do too. And the most interesting thing that I've seen in the last few years that has changed is in people's education section, people don't just write the place where they've done their bachelor's or master's. People write a whole host of online certificates that they've done. I don't know if you've noticed it. I'm assuming you've noticed it and others have, but I see this and not just from Coursera, like of course, like from other places, but to me, it's a net new addition to where learners are coming from. So frankly, I think everyone is hiring people who are doing something online, because fundamentally, I think, Vikram, you laid it out really well. In a realistic world, skills are changing every day. Even for you and I, we have to constantly enable, uplift ourselves. Like, for example, ChatGPT, AI are the biggest things. Like Andrew Ng, Coursera's founder, has some courses on AI for everyone. He's building one on ChatGPT. Like, we have to, upskill ourselves. So I think majority learners around the world, especially in India, that is so job focused, competitive, aspirational, middle income and above, folks are taking online courses because they see the realization that they have to enable themselves, they have to upskill themselves, and they add that to their resume. And I think that that stands out. Like, when I hire, I see that as a mark of hustle. I see that as a mark of, you're not satisfactory with what you've done. You want to kind of enable yourself and upskill yourself with the time. So that's a realistic answer, frankly. Second, what we're seeing with enterprises is that Coursera has recently launched something called Coursera Hiring Solutions, where we're trying to do exactly this. We talked about the triangle. We have 120 million learners. We have 300 plus authoring partners, and we have 7,000 plus kind of institutions absorbing, out of which a lot are enterprises. So we're actually building something, and we've talked about it in the media, called Coursera Hiring Solutions, to then say, hey, enterprises who you're actually leveraging our content to upskill your employees, would you like to actually look at skills on our platform and hire folks who graduate from degrees or hire folks who graduate from short courses? It's very early because this takes deep work, because we're building this on the platform for employers to be able to sift through. What would that mean? Vikram, if you have to hire me, you have to go on Coursera. You will then be able to see Rupal's skill profile, and you'll say, okay, I want someone who's done data science, who's done business, etc. And then you'll see, have I done that? Have I completed the content? If you're interested, you might ask me to apply for XYZ job. So those are the kinds of things that we're building. In early proof of evidence, Axis Bank came on board and is in that process with us and has made a few hires. I think we've talked about that with the media as well. But we want to do this thoughtfully. We want to do this right. And we're seeing early proof of evidence for sure.
I think it's fascinating, Rupal, what you guys are building, especially for Indian audience here, based out of India. I will wrap our conversation here, but for all our learners, I think one biggest piece which I took from this discussion is that I can go into IIT without JEE. In these top institutions where they are offering online programs in partnership with Coursera, I don't need to crack the JEE. So that's the biggest piece I took from this discussion. The second piece is clearly Indian institutions as well as the academia as well as industry is moving towards looking at how we can have a continuous learning, and a very big role will be played by Indian institutions in partnership with enablers like Coursera in the due course of time. So I will definitely see this space more often, and I'm very sure, Rupal, that in the next couple of years you guys are going to build a lot of programs with tier 2 and tier 3 institutions as well, because we've got huge amount of population which needs to be trained, and if you have to attend that GER, a lot has to be done by everyone.
100%. And very timely notes, Vikram. 100%. If you're a learner, if you're watching, keep hustling. And know that it's a marathon, and there are all of these online degrees that can help you enable yourself, upskill yourself, whether it's on campus or online. And Vikram, like I said, it's lots of opportunity. It's a marathon. It's generally a marathon. It's going to take all of us to come together to really do what we all want to do and to bridge that amount of impact.
Thank you so much, Rupal, for your time. We overshoot on the time, but I appreciate that you actually spend 22 more minutes with us. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.